Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and respected leader from the world of hospitality and tourism, a friend and a neighbor from Gurgaon, India, Mr. Rattan Keswani. Rattan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Rattan is the former Deputy Managing Director of Lemon Tree Hotels. He's also the former President of Trident Hotels, and he's an author. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Check In, Never Check Out. So, Rattan, before we talk about hospitality, tell me a little bit about your own journey in brief.
I think my journey is captured in the book. And, now the stage is captured in the title. So the journey began, 42 years ago, and there was no notion of being a hotelier. I wanted to become, do my MBA in a premier institution, maybe join the world of marketing or advertising. As the book explains, some interesting reasons it didn't happen. And I found my way into hotels. And I was a finance graduate from DAV College in Chandigarh. I did very well in the rankings of the Punjab University. So I guess in a manner, I can only explain it to say it was destined. My original choice was to be a pilot. And when I was about 16, the Air Marshal of the Indian Air Force was a gentleman called P.C. Lal. Some of people of our generation might remember him. One of my relatives getting a medal. And he said, "Young man, what would you like to do?" And I said, "I'm very keen to be a pilot." And he looks at me, he says, "Well, you can forget about that dream." Sounded pretty rude at that time. Made sense. You wear specs. What's your power? I told him, and he said, "Well, ground handling, radars, logistics maybe, but fly you never will."
Yes.
So that put paid for this first one. The story tells, the story is told in the book in the second one. And then therefore hotels happened. And it began with the management training program of the Oberoi School, which was for 2 years. And then I passed out, became an assistant front office manager in Mumbai. I was there with them for about 2 years. In a bit of a wrong moment in time, I left the company, joined what is today called the Lalit. That time was the first Holiday Inn Crown Plaza in Delhi of the Suri Group. Was with them as director of operations for about a year. And then I was called back by the then chairman, Mr. P.R.S. Oberoi, and we kind of kissed and made up. And then I spent 31 years with them.
Wow.
So I, had many positions, and then I was a number two in, handling 3 or 4 projects, properties in Saudi Arabia. Then I moved to Sri Lanka, opened my first hotel called the Cecil up in the mountains. It's also Oberoi Hotel, second hotel really of acquisition. GM Bangalore, GM Delhi, President Trident Hotels. I handled the co-branding piece that happened with Hilton. Had the responsibility of disbanding the branding because Hilton moved away. Created the Trident brand for them. Was president till 2012, which is when I took a bold step of starting a personal joint venture with Lemon Tree Hotels called Carnation. Lemon Tree only owned hotels at that time. We were very keen to get to the management space. I knew nothing about it. But somehow Patu trusted me with that exercise. And so it was a decade-long journey. We signed about 67 hotels. At one point in time, we was running about 48 of them. The rest were under project stage. Started a new brand called Oreca Hotels, which is their foray into luxury. And I left them about 2.5 years ago, and I'm on my own right now, and then got time to write the book.
Amazing.
Which I had waited for or planned for, but never got to in all those years. And that's where we are.
What an amazing story. Thank you. So let's now talk about the hospitality and tourism. You spent a whole lifetime in that. Now, let me start by the first question. What are some of the biggest challenges, in your view, the hospitality industry in India is currently facing in the post-pandemic world, especially given the fact that there has been revenge tourism, as they call it, and there's a huge thrust on increasing tourism into our country?
So 2 problems. If you want to talk about your second comment, but the first challenge, I think it will take a long time for international tourists to come back, even in those small numbers that they wish to, because we're a long-haul destination. Corporate travel is still limited to some project visitations, some CEO visitations, some training visitations. I mean, just to give you an answer, how many private jets of CEOs fly into Heathrow or New York every day? You know, those many probably fly into the Delhi airport or Mumbai airport in about 2 years. So, you know, that high value corporate travel is not there. If you take out the neighboring countries' visitations, we are about 5 or 7 million from an international tourism perspective. Buckingham Palace has visitations about 10 times that number.
Wow.
It's not a very favored destination. And I think we put too much of credence into it because it'll take a long time. And even if you build it up, you'll build it up 10%, which is a little drop in the ocean.
Right.
So that will remain. But I think revenge tourism kind of brought the focus of the spending power of the domicile customer here, which people never thought would happen. That people would be, there would be enough money at play and there would be enough people willing to pay top dollar, was never thought. And so I think hotels were underpriced for the kind of service and quality we gave. That disproved that quite tremendously. Over the years, and every economist has talked about it, you know, the tier 2, tier 3 cities, the amount of money being made, the amount of money potential to be spent is quite incredibly high. They just wish to spend in a different manner. It's a world that they've just got into. So, you know, people graduate like they graduate education, graduate into economy hotels and mid-scale hotels. And some, because they have wealth, jumpstart and go straight to luxury. So there was a whole movement of differences that happened, which was an opportunity for all hoteliers.
Correct.
The second thing that happened is there was a doubt whether Indian customers understood quality, understood food. We don't realize that even though years before about 10, 11, 12 million outbound used to happen, now it's crossing, you know, coming close to about 20 million. People spend top dollar when they go abroad because on their family and for holidays, they tend to spend a lot more, about 30% more than they would, even for their own corporate travel within their own country.
Right.
So they touched and felt and imbibed luxury, both in food and beverage, understanding of alcohol, culture. And those they brought back a lot of knowledge that was a little difficult, particularly post-pandemic, for the team to be able to handle. Because suddenly your customer was more knowledgeable than you were.
Right.
Two, because during COVID, while hoteliers deny it, a lot of jobs were lost. A lot of people didn't come back into their original jobs. Either the same company set up a hotel in their location, and so they could kind of fit in, or they just abandoned the vocation. And because of the inherent reputation that hotels have, or very long work, hours are very long, they don't pay you well. It's a bit of a misunderstood industry. So while there were limited people getting into catering colleges and wanting this, now there are even more limited people wanting to work in hospitality because suddenly they realize that for anybody half intelligent in our country, jobs are available. You know, people say you're not, you know, they're just not educated or mature enough to take them. But jobs are aplenty. Insurance, retail, I mean, we can name it all. But people don't chase those vocations as much as they should, because they get stuck with engineering and finance and stuff like that. So, yeah, so before, finance was a little difficult to get. Let's call it logical finance. Today, finance is available because the world and analysts have understood that there's a long-term return and the valuation models are very different. And it's a huge growth model, particularly in our country. But competitive and useful sites are few and far between. And therefore, they become even more expensive because land price is a big problem in India, as is the price of heat, light, and power. And now faced with the fact that while you keep building hotels, and there's a huge amount of growth that's happening in multi-tiered segments and locations, where are they going to find that talent to staff them? And which is the other little balance that's being struggled with.
Correct.
So skilling institutions have come up. Catering college uptake is down to 40% of the seats, which is not good. So that is going to be the big challenge. And the fervor and the opportunity available in tier 2, tier 3 has been understood, and they're all getting there because there's very few sites available in the metro cities. So metro cities will get the maximum demand. So rates will thankfully go high.
Yeah.
But then the movement happened towards resorts and everybody's clapping on the high average rates. I think it will find its balance very, very quickly. It's not a hockey stick. It will find its trends again. So that's where I see.
Very well said. And yet, Rattan, as you mentioned, I noticed a lot of new hotels coming in. A lot of new chains are coming in. You have built and launched new hotel brands like the Trident and Aurica. My question is, what are some of the key factors that go into building a new hotel brand? What are some of the key success factors?
Okay, so I think I'm sure people follow a marketing guru called Seth Godin. And Seth says it in a couple of his podcasts, and I've read a couple of his books where he says hoteliers know nothing about branding. They only set up new names in new locations, but basically this is heading. So if Nike put in a hotel, set of people, hotels under their name, their brand would sell. But brands are not brands, they are names. They are labels that people carry on their shoulder, which is a limitation. I think it's more to break through non-compete clauses of locations and exclusion zones. It's opportunistic by creating the little tweaks in the branding. I was very focused in both that I would find its zone of singularity, try and find those few things that stood out, which if you went to Trident, what did it stand for? And you 100% delivered, even though there were 3, 4, 5, pieces in it. And that was the effort we made with Aurica that worked for both resorts. So we started with the resort hotel kind of combination. But the business model and the economics model would follow more or less the learnings I had from the business model of Lemon Tree Hotels, where the efficiencies and the ratios are very high. So because of the efficiencies, your value proposition for the customer also can be judged and offered. So we put on those 7, 8 items, which were both touch, feel, numbers, return. So people say loyalty. In my opinion, loyalty is not a notion that one works with. There are cards. That's all. It's points. But if loyalty can be brought in because of a sense of comfort with what you promised. So people used to find that, hiring EWDs or people with, who are differently able would kind of kill the luxury experience. You've got this hang up, right? Lemon Tree was very good at it, and it got continued because people appreciated it. They appreciated the fact that they were engaging in a socially active environment. So those were some, critical triggers that were differentiated, and I think they've stuck to it. I hope they stick to it too. So whether the choice of color or the names that have been put in, some are generic because they will become sub-brands, and some are locational because they explain the ethos of what you are offering on a terrace or a location or a chessboard in a tea garden, with a name that resounds with the location, with the coffee garden, with the coffee bean, that kind of stuff. So you're part of the branding experience, but it's all a service identity experience, if I may say so. So that was in both parts.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Thank you. But the profile of the customer is also changing. Age-wise, the millennials, the Gen Zs are now, what I read, are now looking more for experiences, and they're taking their decisions based on reviews. I'd love to get your perspective on how is the hotel industry adapting to this very new kind of experiences or the new kind of expectations from younger guests.
I think it's still a learning curve. You hear announcements about experiences, but they're just improved language versions of what was there in the past. So you added 2, 3 spa experiences because you've heard that generation talking about having tested and touched it in some other part of the world. But, the interesting, I did a lot of work with this part. Millennials think differently. Gen Z are still new in the business.
Correct.
We've never, or at least the last that I ever chatted with anybody else, we've never distilled by researching what do the millennials truly want and what are they prepared to pay for.
Right.
In a resort, on a mountain, on a beach, in terms of entertainment, because there are varied choices. Then you have to select from that and find your competence in which ones you can deliver. Otherwise, it's good language, but it's truly not doing so. So I had a interesting discussion during COVID with a panel of all senior, hoteliers that time, and we chatted about it. And I said, look, everybody's talking about working from home, etc., etc. Bad word, good word now. I said, if you see what's happening abroad, people have moved away from their main cities. They're actually sitting in a beach resort. The beaches are really cheap, but they're getting high Wi-Fi, intensity at the end of the beach. And they're talking about it. So let's look at your location. So we talked about Kurg and, other places. Are you able to give that? Then if I can set up a dining experience for you when you are 50 meters from the hotel building or 100 meters from the hotel building, you're responding to that person actually enjoying what you're showing in the photograph, which is a laptop sitting on the beach working, and yet there's a cocktail and a griddle. But unless you can do that, you can't promise customized experience. You understand? Which is typical for what I would want in a beach. I have a tree house in a mountain resort.
Correct.
I can't connect. I can't even connect my phone. So if you can strengthen that, you promise that the millennial will come.
Well said.
Otherwise, and then you learn to tell new stories. Today's experiences, and you have to be a good storyteller in your content.
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing too many stories, even though they've created some experiences. So, that's my
Very interesting. Another question I wanted to get your perspective on was, in a few minutes back, you were talking about how we don't have enough trained people coming up because of the various schools that we have. And yet, when I've experienced this in, say, China, etc., technology and robots are coming in. I'd love to get your perspective on how is technology and maybe robotics going to change the hotel business?
One, I must admit, I'm a bit of an old-fashioned hotelier. I still think hotel hospitality will be a lot about high-touch feel at different age groups. I think robotics, technology, AI will be more an enabler to provide quality and quantitative change initially at the back of the house.
Okay.
Because hoteliers, I don't think we have the wherewithal to, though in the larger brands it's happening, to spend money on research and R&D and fit something that fits our model. Ready-made models can be changed by another set of 2 kids tomorrow. And suddenly you're not going to look at the ROI you wanted. And I've had these discussions earlier and recently too. So I think if everybody concentrated on creating the value at the root of what you really don't want to spend too much time on, what you really want to spend time on with the touch and feel of the customer, and then segment it as to the price value proposition. Because robotics and service with a robot, hey, sounds very good. The robot may not cost you in the long term as much as an employee does. I personally don't think a guest is paying prime dollar to have a mechanized voice talking to him or her. And be able to open your glass of, bottle of champagne and pour it for you. I don't, just the whole sense of the aura of the sommelier coming and giving you an introduction, or you doing a flambe in front of me, I think will provide more top dollar. But for the assembly line, budget economy, these things will work as they work in airports.
Correct. Well said. So, Rattan, I'm now going to move to your book, Check In, Never Check Out. And I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mr. Rattan Keswani's book.
Thank you.
I'm going to get a copy for myself. My first question: how does check-in, never check out reflect your personal philosophy and approach to hospitality management? And I know you dwelt upon it in a few sentences when we started our conversation.
Yeah, so the original, so I thought of writing this book many years ago, but as I moved locations, learnings changed, understanding of life changed. Earlier, you used to want to complain about the management, and you were the management, so therefore your storylines had to change.
Yeah.
But the original title I had got usurped by 2-3 of my peers in their backdrops on their conferences. So I said, okay, that's gone. It's becoming passé. And one night I was just mulling over saying, now what am I going to do? And I was humming the song Hotel California by Eagles, just to myself, thinking on my own, middle of the night, smoking outside my balcony. And it said, you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. Right? So said, we'll use the terminology to say you can check out anytime you like, but I can't leave, which means my heart does not leave the business.
Correct.
And I find that a problem for myself even 2.5 years later, because I read something, it aggravates me. I get aggravated on LinkedIn for people who follow me, because some things are just rooted in the system and they can't be rooted out.
Yeah.
But I can't get it out of my system. As much as I reacted, want to leave it in the early years, every 2-3 years, I think it's so embedded that I want to talk about. And it's embedded because of the experiences and the learnings, both in management and people handling, that I had, where people contributed, which is what I then try to bring to the book, saying, why do I feel that?
Well said. And can you talk a little bit about how mentorship has shaped your career, and why is it crucial in hospitality?
So let me touch the first part first. I think mentorship is important everywhere. Good mentors, however, not really available or accessible to normal companies, normal people. So that's a bit of a gap. Is there true mentorship being provided in hospitality? Not really. And this is what I teach when I teach, young students and, other management institutions, that, and mentorship is also something that you learn and you train for. And I don't think too many people are getting there, or they are from an industry that doesn't connect with our industry. So, there are these gaps there. But I think the best mentorship could be the other way. You follow somebody you think is your mentor initially, and try and clone some of the good things that the person is doing, which is how I did. Whether the gait, the personality, the way you dress, what you know. And I said, let me mark sheet myself. This person is much better than me in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How am I either from him going to get that learning, or from the outside get that learning? Because I must get to be better than him to be able to occupy his position quicker than he did. And I, one of my bosses I used to talk to, he also helped me launch the book in one of the locations. And I used to tell him, give me work, I'll stay back. Tell me the reports you're going to give the boss tomorrow morning. Let me do all the grunge work for you. When you come in an hour earlier, you read through it. If you don't like it, trash it. Right? And the secretary can do what you would. You'll need an extra hour. I might need 3. But if you take it through in its unfiltered form, one, it'll tell me I'm good enough to take your chair. And my whole desire is to take a chair. He used to take that language from me, not me, but many people would. But I've told a lot of people, you can learn small things from different people that you admire. And I think the biggest mentorship, in my opinion, is provided by a bad boss. And people, kind of laugh when I say that, is because a bad boss teaches you what to never do. Because you bitch and complain, and it goes in your mind saying, if I was ever a superior, I would never do this.
Right.
That's a bigger learning curve than being taught what's the right thing to do.
Very well said. Well said. So I have time for 2 more questions for you. My next question is, can you share a memorable story or an anecdote from your book that has particularly resonated with you?
Oh, there are so many. Resonated with me. And it's in the book. Okay, I have to be a little careful. It's it's a story that, may not resonate unless a person reads that chapter. But let me bring it up anyway. It's one of my more out of hospitality and management stories in the book, which, we all talk about pride of work and competitive, score sheets that we maintain against the competitor. So like when you were at ITC, we were at Oberoi Hotels, there was a huge competitive element between two companies, at least in the hospitality piece. So, hotels are known for some nefarious practices, if I may call them. And nobody told us how to identify some of the nefarious entries. So we had to learn ourselves, how do they dress? And they used to dress very elegantly, and it used to be a problem. So it was a challenge. So we used to keep a score sheet against each other on shift, because the bosses would catch you out if security had locked down that, so many people had gone in. And one of my security supervisors came and said, we need to stop this person. The person was as elegant and as elegantly dressed as a French model, close to 5 feet 11 inches tall, binding hat. That wasn't going to go well if it went wrong. She obviously seemed to be, a classy person. So I said, lobby mein nahi, not in the lobby. Go to the floor. Because his mobile phones were not there, right? Go to the floor, shop the person, and call me from the floor phone. We'll address her there, because it's a bit of a private space. Something goes wrong, at least you can handle it.
Correct.
In the meantime, I think the lady also sensed something was wrong. And the host, if I may call the person, came out of the room. And the host was just like a peer artist, was little goatee beard. So I addressed him. I said, I'm sorry, but we do not allow guests beyond an hour. And unless the guest is registered. So cannot allow the lady into your room unless you're willing to register her with all her particulars. And he was very apologetic with a very French accent, apologized for his conduct, and said, let the lady leave. So while I was talking to him, I told the security supervisor, who could log me down to say he didn't do it properly, out to the door and downstairs, and then rode the elevator and went back to my desk. I was the duty manager at that. And then within a few seconds, I heard some loud noises and angry comments and abuses in all kinds of languages. And I walked up across there, and at the lobby, this lady was taking the security supervisor trip. Now, by the profile, I could have talked to her differently, but she was just a very elegant person. And I said, but ma'am, I thought we understood that you would leave. She says, yes, I did. But he's insulted me. He's abused me. Oh, okay. So I looked at him, and she said, so we just used two pseudonyms. He said, I am from John's gang, which I find very upsetting because I'm from Peter's gang. There were these gangs of touts or pimps, if I may call them that way. But the elegance of outfit, the elegance of behavior, the elegance of language, and the pride competitively between two organizations. And I've written the book that if I was wearing a hat, I would have doffed it at her just for the pride. Don't know if it makes sense in the syndrome, but it taught me something. That even all kinds of professions still follow the same language and methodology of success. So,
Correct. Well said. We've run out of time, Rattan, but I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. I just love the story about the pilot. I know that I had the same challenges with my weak eyesight. So even though my father was in the army, I couldn't join. Thank you for talking to me about your journey in hospitality and tourism. We covered a lot of ground on branding, on what you see as perspectives on tourism, hospitality. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book. I just loved the anecdote. And as you said, obviously, you're a very, very good storyteller. So your book must be full of some really amazing stories. Thank you for speaking to me.
Do read it, and urge your audience to read it too. But thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast. A platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.